Hi everyone, welcome back to the garden. Today is a glorious day. After a crisp frost last night, now the sky is blue, golden sunlight's filtering through the garden, and there's signs of life everywhere, which is great to see. But just before we start looking ahead, it's time to look back at my last video. In that video, I really wanted to help those of you who are maybe newer to your tropical style garden adventure, put together a few common sense tips that I've learned from my experiences, mistakes in the past, and how you can create a garden without spending as much money and without losing as many plants. But was it too sensible? Well, there's a reason why my garden here is an experimental exotic paradise, because of the experimental plants. And in my last video, I talked about ones I've lost along the way, some which were definitely pushing things a little bit far, others which literally had no chance of surviving here long term and I should have known better. But have I learned from my mistakes? Are things any different now? Or am I still pushing the boundaries of what I can grow here? Well, let's get into it with 3 plants which are definitely a bit of a gamble for me. Let's go. I may then mention once or twice in my videos that hardy palms are one of my favourite groups of exotic evergreen plants. If you're wanting to create a beautiful tropical style, exotic or jungle garden here in the UK, you can't go wrong with a Trachycarpus. This waggy here, it just looks beautiful whatever the weather. For the majority of UK gardens, for the majority of UK winters, these guys will be absolutely fine. They'll just keep growing away, looking more and more majestic every single year. They really are a great plant to start with, and start with them is something that I did. But as you get a little bit further on your journey, your inner collector starts looking at other plants. You start getting a little bit more experimental, and maybe you start thinking about a feather palm. So then you bought your Trachycarpus from your local garden centre, you planted it out, it's grown beautifully well. You could definitely leave things there, you've made the best choice for your garden. But let's face it, if you're watching my videos, you probably didn't leave things there, did you? You know you didn't. You went online, you searched for rare, unusual, exotic plant supplies here in the UK, and you found there's a lot of hardy palm growers right here who sell things a little bit more out there. And your next choice will be a feather palm. Here in the UK, it's generally Butea, such as this Butea eriospatha, or Jubaea chilensis. Costing considerably more, but still relatively tough in all areas other than the coldest parts of the UK. These palms are definitely the next step up. Butea is maybe a little bit more of a gamble. Jubaea has proved very tough and hardy for me, but with these palms at least, they do have considerable cold hardiness once mature, once established, and in a sunny sheltered spot. But then, how do you take things further? What else is out there? Well, let's get on to my first proper plant gamble. When I embarked then on this fire pit project you see behind me, I was full of energy, full of enthusiasm, full of confidence, but also full of common sense. And I decided that for this end of my garden, furthest from the house, the most exposed, I was going to have plants which didn't need protection. And I even said that in one of my videos. Then it pretty much changed to minimal protection. And then, as I got plants like this section here, well, let's face it, I lied to you all. I chose a plant which definitely might need protection, particularly while it's small. Yes, my first big plant gamble is right here. This palm is Butiagrus eriospatha, a truly rare palm here in the UK. There's not many people that sell them, and this one came from Hardy Palms. I think it's actually sold that batch, and they aren't available currently, but follow their page on Facebook, and you might see if more of these come available. So why is this palm such a gamble for me? Well, simply put, this is a hybrid palm. I've lost Butea in my garden. When it comes to palms, feather palms in particular, the more chunky, the bigger the palm is, generally speaking, the cold hardier it is. So Butea odorata get very big, very chunky, very robust palms like the Jubaea. Those can take a lot of cold. At the other end of the scale, more coconut style palms with thinner trunks, faster growing, these softer, more delicate leaves, they generally tend to be a lot softer. So here is a palm which is a cross between the Butea, which I've already lost, and an even softer palm. That doesn't make sense, does it? I've moved in the wrong direction when it comes to common sense and cold hardiness. But why have I chosen this palm here? Well, for me, there's a risk to it, but there's definitely a reward. And that reward is having something truly incredible, which you definitely don't see every day here in the UK. Now then, quick little geeky interlude, this won't take a minute. If I was going to justify this palm to myself, which I did, and I'll go through now with you, one of the palms involved in this cross is Butea eriospatha, the one that I stood in front of just a minute ago. That palm has proven to be, well, in a small sample size at least, one of the toughest Butea that I've grown here. I've lost small odorata. That Butea, the eriospatha, has grown very well, it's grown quickly, it's recovered from being transplanted from our old house, and it's grown in an area which doesn't see a lot of direct sun. So as far as I'm concerned, it's definitely one of the best Buteas you can grow here. The Butiagrus involved in this cross, the coconut style palm I talked about, that is actually Romanzoffiana, which is one of the hardier forms of Butiagrus. And the specific form is actually a Santa Catarina form, which basically means it's a very soft feather palm, but the toughest variant, and it grows in mountainous areas of Brazil, that kind of area. So that's generally why, if you're gonna have a palm which is an exciting cross between a softer palm and an even softer one, you might as well start off with the toughest variant of each, combine them, and then maybe, just maybe, there's a chance of this palm making it to full size here in the UK. So that's why I think this palm here, as Nigel said at Hardy Palms, is probably the best Butiagrus you can grow in the UK. Not just in terms of getting through winter, but also in terms of growing well during our cooler summers, because the plants actually come from cooler areas that actually see frost, which you probably wouldn't expect. So there we go, geeky bit over. That's how I technically justify this plant to me. But on an emotional level, this palm doesn't grow like a Trachycarpus. It grows faster than the Butia eriospatha. This palm has the potential to be a proper beast. I'll put a picture on now that I've shamelessly stolen from Hardy Palms to show you how big these plants get. Yes, if this thing grows, this will be a monumental focal point of my garden. In fact, for the whole village probably, but we'll see. I'm relying on quite a string of winters to get there. So what have I done to keep it alive? Well, firstly, this whole area is raised up quite considerably, a path for design, but also a practical point to hopefully improve the drainage, get this area warmed up quicker in spring and get more growth out of it. There's a lot of grit and sharp sand added to the top of the soil, but it can reach into the rich soil below, so hopefully a good compromise between winter survival and hopefully thriving in summer. And then I have protected this the past couple of winters. So this palm here, I bought it a couple of years ago, planted it in May, which is important for half-hardy exotics, gave it a whole season to settle into the ground from a relatively small pot. It settled in, and then I wrapped it up, but only for the coldest spells. The first winter, I was maybe a little bit efficient with my wrapping, we'll say efficient rather than lazy as usual, and didn't put enough layers of fleece around. And as you probably know, if you've only got a couple layers of fleece and those leaves are touching a fleece, the fleece basically does nothing to protect the palm. I know a lot of you might know fleece as frost cloth over in the US, exactly the same stuff. If you want to protect a palm, like I did this previous winter that we're in now, for a couple of the coldest spells, I properly wrapped it. Put 4 canes in the ground, wrapped a lot of fleece around it, and then packed it with more fleece as well. I properly packed it in, and now, after -5, -6, ice stays the best part for a week of freezing weather. It's looking green and beautiful. I know it's early days yet, but at this time, in early March, I'm definitely encouraged. So this palm appears to have made it through what our classes are regular, normal to slightly colder normal winters. But what's the other gamble here? Well, the elephant in the room is the price. For full transparency then, I got this palm about a year before they went on general sale at Hardy Palms. As you probably know by now, if you need a lot of palms, get in touch with Nigel. He can sort pallet deals out, and there's usually plants which you don't see on the website, so that was definitely worth doing. But when he came to sell them at the larger size after another year growing in the pots, they were selling at £300 each, which, however you look at it, is a lot of money. You could buy a lot of Trachycarpus for £300, particularly when you're buying small, which is a top tip from my previous video. £300 is a lot of money that you could spend on hard landscaping, other plants in your garden, plants which aren't a risk at all. I understand that. And for me, even at the price I paid, it was a considerable amount of money. Do I think it's a fair price? Well, there simply aren't any other people selling them, apart from Ed Croft, who I believe is selling one at the minute on Facebook, so maybe check that out. These palms haven't been produced many times before. It's not a cross that's been made many times. So for something as rare as that, with that promise, if you're going to go for a special palm, that one really is special. But to be blunt about it, would I buy one of these if I were you? Well, if I lived in a colder area, for me personally, I wouldn't risk it. Here in North Lincolnshire, we're not a million miles from the sea, so whilst we're not the most mild area, we're certainly not the absolute coldest either. There's maybe a fighting chance that with some luck over the next few winters, a bit of protection and choosing the right spot, this plant will make it. But if you live in the very coldest areas, in all honesty, I wouldn't spend your money on this. Buy some tougher hardy palms and you'll get more enjoyment out of those for a lot longer as well. But if you live on the south coast, especially around the Cornwall region, if you live in one of those sheltered urban microclimates which I'm always banging on about, if there's a chance that plants like this can really make it for you, honestly, you're not going to get something more spectacular than this. Fast growing, beautiful, a serious jaw-dropping plant for your garden. You can't go wrong. Just go for it. But for the rest of us, it's certainly a little bit of a gamble. But from this palm here, which costs lots of money, I want to talk about another plant gamble, one which cost me the price of a pack of seeds, but I'm now facing a bit of a choice on. So for me, these days, especially gardening on a budget, the amount of money you spend on a plant definitely factors into whether it's worth the gamble. But you can spend pretty much no money on a plant and it still be a bit of a risk. Eventually, the time comes for a decision. Do you plant it out or not? Well, this is one which I'd appreciate your input on in the comment section below. I'll show you which one it is now. The plant in question is none other than this, the spiral aloe. Aloe polyphylla or polyphylla. We'll stick to polyphylla because it amuses me. This beautiful succulent comes from mountainous regions where it can actually survive cold temperatures, frosts, and even decent amount of rainfall. But despite that, a lot of people really struggle to grow them here in the UK, particularly in the north. So is it worth the risk of planting it outside? The robin might sound beautiful, but if you could hear what he's saying, he's basically saying I'm a complete mug for even considering planting this exotic beauty outside, particularly when I've cared for it for so long. I actually sowed the seeds for this plant back in around 2016. You can germinate them in a glass of water, and although it's very easy in theory, only one plant actually made it through to getting planted in a pot. Maybe I did something wrong. But that resulting plant was obviously the source of a lot of care, a lot of TLC, until it got to a size where it had to live outside. This plant then has been potted up since, and I'm under no illusion that if I potted up even further, it would probably be about half the size again. But as you can see, compared to a sort of sack barrow, it is quite a significant sized plant. It's a beauty. So what have I done to protect it so far? Since we moved to this house then, and this plant's been in this pot, it's gone through what we'll say is an entirely deliberate set of overwintering trials and tests. This plant has been in a polytunnel for some winters, kept above freezing, and it's grown absolutely fine, no problem at all. A little bit of the brown spotting, which can occur when they get a little bit too wet and humid, but other than that, no problem. It's also been just down the side of the house, no overhead cover, no protection, and in fact, it probably got more rain there than anticipated, so that was maybe a real test, and it came through it really well. Again, a little bit more of this brown marking, but nothing other than that. Then this past winter, it's been in the polytunnel, which I've only actually put up for, we'll say, the real coldest events. And it's only been heated for that 1 week we had where it was around -5, -6 at night. So this plant has seen sub-zero temperatures. It's had some overhead cover when it was really cold, but the rest of the time it's been open to the elements, the rain and everything, and it looks better than it's ever looked. So that might be down to the cover when it needs it and airing it out and venting it when it didn't. Or it could simply be it's now a good enough size that it can take a bit more cold and moisture. So it's definitely time to make a decision. Because ultimately, although I've had it in this pot for a lot of years now, it's a plant which I need to pot up again to get it to grow. And I'm then getting to an even bigger plant, which is going to be very heavy to move outside every winter, which obviously isn't a deterrent to me. I can happily lug this down out of the polytunnel every single year. But it gets to the point where you think, do I really just want this plant to be bigger in a pot to keep it year after year? Or does it really deserve a spot in the garden? Particularly when I've developed this area of the garden behind me here with the most sunny areas, the best drainage, and possibly the best spot for this plant. But what do you think? Should I plant it out? Should I keep it potted? Would it be a shame? Would it be a real experiment? This one is a proper gamble. And in all honesty, I really am on the fence. Even then, on an early March day like today, you can see that this part of the garden here is a proper sun trap. This is the area where I was thinking about planting this aloe. Now, it doesn't need a huge amount of heat. It doesn't even need the sunniest spot. But what it really does need is winter drainage. And there's one special tip for planting, which can actually keep them alive even here up north, which I was told by Henry. You know who you are if you're watching this. It's a tip I'd heard before, but to actually see it in his Yorkshire garden, well, it's a bit of an eye-opener. And that is simply to plant them on a slope at a 45-degree angle. And that way, the leaves, which as you can see, are arranged in this beautiful spiral rosette, hence the spiral aloe name, those are very good at collecting water. And to get a plant like this, particularly a softer succulent through winter, you need to have them as dry as possible. So if you plant it at a 45-degree angle, such as here maybe, on this slope, or around this corner here, in theory, it's got the best chance of surviving this part of my garden. And as you know, there's lots of plants here which have survived and thrived despite our cold, wet winters. But I'm also aware there's other plants in the garden here which, despite claims of being cold hardy, certainly haven't made it, like this Buhiea. So it is very much a gamble. Let me know what you would do. Should I plant out the Aloe or should I keep it potted? Is this the right spot for it? Let me know, and whatever you all generally decide is what I'll be doing this spring. But there is one final plant gamble which we're going to look at today. Well, let's get into it. When it comes down to really risky plants and proper botanic gambles, here in my garden it would be easy to say bamboo. These are a plant with a reputation, and deservedly so in certain situations. But here in my garden, I've chosen varieties which, although they might run, they're not Pseudosassa japonica. They're not just going to whip within a couple of years and start popping up in hedges, shrubs, and be an absolute nightmare to get rid of. I've chosen the right varieties for me here, the right level of risk that I'm willing to take on, and most importantly, I will be putting a barrier around all the ones in my garden which haven't got a barrier yet. So that way I can minimise the risk of these plants escaping. You could say maybe Tetrapanax. That's a more recent plant introduction, or more recently popular, but a plant which again, it can run and it can sucker, and it can pop up in lawns next door. That isn't ideal. But what I have found is that if you plant them in relatively sensible spots and you're not afraid of just pulling out the suckers, again, they're not that difficult to keep on top of. So for my third plant gamble, again, I thought outside the box. Yes, you might have seen with that Aloe, I planted that a good few years ago, and although it could have grown faster if I potted up every single year, it's a plant which I put a lot of time into. And for me, that really is the gamble, putting time into plants. We've never had a greater range of plants available to us here in the UK, particularly exotics. You can go to garden centres, specialists, there's loads of nurseries you can get rare, unusual palms, beautiful plants from, and get them delivered to your door within a couple of days. That's amazing, it's mind-blowing. Sometimes it's very easy to just see a specimen, go for it, get that impulse buy and get it in your garden without really considering it. Again, check out my last video. But when you do consider things, actually growing from seed becomes the real gamble, putting that effort in. You might grow maybe annuals from seed, you might grow cannas, bananas and enjoy them over a few years, but is it worth growing a palm from seed? Is it worth growing a very slow growing hardy feather palm from seed? Well, for me, this is my biggest gamble and a plant that I absolutely want to find a home for here in my garden. Now, I do appreciate I'm saying this as a man in his mid-30s and not his 70s, but when it came to my garden here, I still wanted some instant impact. This Jubaea chilensis, I bought this one back in 2016, 2017, and it was already a decent sized plant with a base around the size of a football in a 160 litre pot. But already it was 17 years old, and that was 8 years ago. So a bit of quick maths will tell you that this plant now is around a quarter of a century old. That's a lot of time, and yes, it's a big plant here, it's a stunning specimen, but it's certainly nowhere near as wide as it's going to be. It's nowhere near towering over my head yet. So why would you consider growing a plant like this from seed? Why would you do it? If you take one thing from this video then, don't be afraid of growing something from seed this spring, especially try something a little bit slower. Move away from your annuals, your perennials, just growing something for a summer display, and maybe think outside the box. Grow something really special for your garden. I know with my garden there's a lot of mature established plants which were planted that way. And like I said in my last video, I wish I'd planted a lot of them, including the bamboo and the Trachycarpus at smaller sizes. But this spring, I would absolutely urge you to try growing something special from seed, and in particular, a palm. You can start with your Trachycarpus, Waggies, Fortunii. You can buy seeds from the palm grower or over on eBay or Rare Palm Seeds, anywhere like that, and truly grow something amazing for your garden. But for me, my biggest gamble 8 years ago was growing a batch of Jubaea chilensis from seed, and this is the one that I've kept. Just look at this. This really is now a stunning plant. I had quite a few growing from seed. I sold most of them a year or two back, sold the last few last year, and I kept this one. Potted up now to a 70 litre pot. Just look at this. Yes, it's a slow growing palm, notoriously so, but without any particularly special care, just overwintered in a cool polytunnel, it's grown to this magnificent size. And to be honest now, it's almost at the size where I'd say, get it planted out in the garden. But I haven't quite got the right spot for it just yet. Honestly, growing from seed, it really gives you the most pleasure. And someone actually commented in one of my recent videos to say, the difference between a gardener and a collector is that a collector will pretty much buy every plant for the garden, whereas a gardener is someone who propagates plants through division, through cuttings, but also growing from seed. And if you're going to grow something from seed, let's face it, the time passes anyway. 5 years goes by in a click of your fingers. So really, you might as well have some cool plants on the go. And if you're going to grow something cool from seed, what's better than a rare, unusual, amazing feather palm like a Jubaea? As you can see, it takes its time, but has it been worth it? Absolutely. And yes, there will be again a decision time when I decide whether this plant is going out into the garden. But I'm excited to choose a spot for this, and I'm excited to see that plant every day and know it's something that I have grown from seed. So yes, even following a video which was largely common sense, helping you avoid plant risks in your garden, I'm very much still taking them here. And those are my 3 biggest plant gambles currently. The rare, expensive hybrid palm, which is definitely pushing the boundaries of what can be grown up here in rural North Lincolnshire. But hopefully, with a bit of protection, the right spot, and some kinder winters, it's got half a chance. The Aloe polyphylla, let me know, should I plant it out? Should I keep it potted? For me, it really is that tricky decision time. I know in theory it can survive outside. Hopefully, being planted at an angle, the right spot for it, again, it's got half a chance, but we'll see. And then probably the biggest gamble of all, I know time passes quickly, so you might as well get a slow growing plant grown from seed. It gives you so much satisfaction. And a lot of the plants I genuinely talk about here are specimens, beautiful big exotics, can be grown from seed. The seeds are out there. Like I said, check eBay, check the palm grower, check rare palm seeds. There's a lot of places, even Craig Grow Paradise has got a wide range of exotics that you can grow from seed. So honestly, this spring, take a gamble. It's not about the money, even if you're going on a very strict budget. Explore what beautiful, amazing plants you can grow from seed, and then you'll face a decision of whether to plant them out as well. It's a tricky one. So I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and please let me know in the comment section below, what are your biggest plant gambles currently? Which plants have you maybe taken a risk on and it's come back to bite you? And which plants have surprisingly survived so far in your garden? It's fantastic to hear all your stories or your experiences. And as I go forward through this year, I really like the comment sections to be just a hive of information, activity. I want to know how you get on in your gardens, get more real world experience, your mistakes, your successes, and everything in between. So head to the comment section below, let me know what you're gambling with this year, and I'll see you in the next video where we might have a little late winter walk through the garden and see how everything's coming together before the real projects start. So thanks again for watching, I'll see you later.